This is the Good Dudes Grow 2.0. On the Good Dudes Grow 2.0, we're here to let you know the importance of plant-based medicine and psychedelics on mental and physical health. We're bringing you stories of how these medicines have changed lives and can save lives. We want to teach you the healing power of plant-based medicine. This is the Good Dudes Grow 2.0.
Welcome, everybody, to the Good Dudes Grow Show. I'm your host, Gary Roberts. Usually I do a little bit intro in the beginning, but I wanted to actually read this intro itself because I didn't want to miss anything because our guest is an extraordinary guest. We have Lieutenant Kegan SMurF Gill on the show. And you know what? I'm just going to read what I have to read, and we'll go from there. Lieutenant Kegan SMurF Gill, whose story exemplifies resilience, innovation, and unyielding human spirit. On January 15, 2014, during a training mission over the Atlantic Sea, Lieutenant Gill faced a catastrophic in-flight emergency that led to the fastest ejection in naval aviation history at an astonishing speed of 695 miles per hour. Despite sustaining life-threatening injuries, including multiple fractures and brain injury, Lieutenant Gill's determination saw him not only survive, but also return to the cockpit of the FA-18E Super Hornet. His journey, however, extended beyond physical recovery, confronted with several psychotic episodes and limitations of traditional medical treatments. Lieutenant Gill explored alternative therapies. This path led him to psychedelic-assisted treatments, which played a pivotal role in his mental health recovery. First of all, we've probably all seen Top Gun, the first one and the second one. I have no idea. 695 miles per hour has got to be fast. So before you get into that, tell us a little bit more about your background, how you got started in the military, and then explain to me a little bit how the accident happened, if you don't mind.
Yeah. I grew up mostly playing outside as much as I could. I didn't really belong in a classroom sitting under fluorescent lighting, filling out worksheets and Scantrons, and kind of always longed for more. And I knew that sitting at a desk job wasn't going to be the career for me. So when I graduated high school, there was a little aviation college, the community college where I grew up in Traverse City, Michigan, called Northwestern Michigan College. And they offered a flight program. And so I signed up. And by the time I was a couple of years into college, I was a certified flight instructor. I got my private, my instrument rating, my commercial, and then my CFI, CFII, my multi-engine rating, and a number of other. And so I started flying professionally as I kind of finished college. And I ended up a corporate pilot for about a year after college, flying all over the United States, like getting good pay, flying nice new aircraft, Gucci equipment, good food, good dinners, good wine. Like it was a good life, but it became kind of routine. And I kind of still wanted more in my life than that. And I had a buddy who was applying to go to Navy officer candidate school. And he had been prior enlisted Air Force and was now going to try to go in and be a pilot in the military. And I didn't know anything about it. I never thought that I could possibly be a military F-18 pilot by any chance. I was a scrappy kid from northern Michigan that, went to community college. I always thought you had to be from the Naval Academy and your dad was an admiral or whatever. And so I ended up listening to my friend Mark and researching it and learning more and applying. And I ended up getting a pilot slot for the Navy. So I went through Navy officer candidate school, which is 3 months of getting yelled at and beat up by the Marine Corps drill instructors. Graduated that evolution as a 01 or ensign in the Navy. And then I headed to Pensacola, Florida to continue the aviation training pipeline. And while I had kind of gotten in on a pilot slot, I still had to earn that. Like it wasn't like they were just going to give it to me. So over the next couple of years, going through primary flight training, intermediate, advanced, and selecting all along the way, I eventually ended up selecting the Super Hornet and heading to Virginia Beach, Virginia, as a wing naval aviator to train in the F-18 Super Hornet. And it was, the first day showing up at this hangar with these big F-18s that you're going to go fly. It was pretty surreal to be like, wow, I can't believe I'm here and I'm doing this job. But another year in the F-18 training. And then I arrived at my first deployable fleet squadron, VFA 143, the Pukin Dogs in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And I spent the next 8 months being the fucking new guy, trying to figure out how to do my job and not suck so much. And it was like drinking out of a fire hose every day. And then that led to this day in January of 2014 that changed my life forever.
And again, I just can't imagine. It was just a routine training mission that you were going on. It wasn't anything, it was something. Have you done this routine training mission before, or?
Yeah, I mean, it was a training mission. However, the training we do, even when we call it routine, is, on the edge of the capabilities of these aircraft and what the human body and mind is capable of. So, what we were doing is practicing dogfighting. So one of the more dangerous skill sets and more complex skill sets that we do in the fighter jet is dogfighting, and it's very physically demanding. You're under immense G-force. Your body weighs 7.5 times its normal weight. So with your gear and everything, that's like weighing 15 to 1,600 pounds. Just the helmet and head on top, weighing 20 pounds when you're just standing here at 1G on the ground. Now, when you're under almost 8 times that, it's like having a 150-pound person hanging onto your head while you're trying to look around, keep sight of the other aircraft, operate the aircraft, operate weapon systems, radar systems, defensive systems. There's a lot going on. And while this was training, when we train as close to the real thing as possible. So other than actually hosing live missiles off at each other, this was about as close to the real thing as you could get.
So when I'll call it the oh shit factor happened, what, I know I've fallen off a few stuff as a firefighter. I've fallen off a couple of things, and I know everything somehow goes in slow motion, and you're going to go either, oh, you know what, this is going to hurt, this is going to leave a mark. What were you thinking going through it? Or did you even have time to think when you went through it at 695 miles an hour?
Yeah, we had gotten through most of that training flight, and we set up for our last round of dogfighting for the day and called the fights on, and all of it was progressing normally. I hit the merge. I was already partially nose low and partially inverted, and I opted to maneuver the jet into a nose low dive down towards the ocean to come back up. And as that aircraft hit bullseye nose low, all I could feel was I went from that 7.5 G pull where I can feel the 1,600 pounds of my body. I can feel the 150 pounds of weight on my head as I'm craning my neck up to see the other aircraft above me. And I'm pulling. All of a sudden that just eases. And I'm pointed straight down at the ocean, accelerating out of control. And very quickly, I felt that ease. And it was like going around a sharp corner in a sports car and then having the steering wheel kick back halfway. Only instead of skidding off the road, now I'm skidding into a dive into the ocean and approaching the speed of sound. And so as I'm in this dive, I immediately pull the throttles back to idle. In a desperate attempt to slow down, I put out the speed brake, but it's too little, too late, and very quickly. I mean, this all just happens in a few seconds.
Yeah.
The ocean is just rushing up at me, and I get this overwhelming sense of doom, like there's no way out of this. And so 2 seconds before I impacted the ocean, in a 51 degrees nose low dive, so very steep dive angle, just 2,000 feet above the ocean, 695 miles per hour, I pulled the ejection handle. And it was almost instinctual at that point because it was so overwhelming and it was very obvious there's no other way out of this.
Incredible. Well, first of all, thank you for your service, and thank God you're okay. That's an incredible story. But what motivated you to get back into the plane after your rehabilitation? I mean, most people would go through that and going, you know what, not doing it. Probably wouldn't even go back into flying commercially, saying, I'm going to stay on the ground this time. But give me a little bit about your mindset on what you were thinking throughout your rehabilitation. What was going through your mind? Was it, can I, will I, or I going to?
Yeah, I mean, it was 2 weeks later, I woke up out of a coma. I had impacted the sound barrier with my body. I had my spine compressed at instantaneous 50 Gs to a 12 to 14 G sustained rocket boost on that ejection seat. Even a normal ejection in straight and level flight below 180 knots, ideally, will still cause permanent damage to a pilot. But I was well outside that envelope. And impacting the sound barrier with my body at that speed, it ripped off my helmet, caused a traumatic brain injury, a broken neck, broken shoulder, broken arms, legs. It had ripped all the gear off my vest, shredded open my dry suit that was to protect me from that icy cold Atlantic Ocean water. And then I spent about 2 hours getting drowned alive by my parachute before being rescued by a Navy H-60 helicopter. But I had no memory of all that as I came to. All I knew is it felt like I was waking up from a dream, except for some reason, all these people were in my room. Why were my friends and family having tears in their eyes? And why are all these machines hooked up to me? Why is my body wrapped in this like vacuum seal plastic? Why am I covered in sutures and staples? And I was just completely out of it. Between the head injury and then the medications they were giving me for pain management, I was pretty loopy. But eventually they came in and said, hey, you're never going to walk again. You're not going to be able to use your arms again. And I remember I thought they had tied me down on this bed, but it was because I was paralyzed. I couldn't move. And they said, your military flying career is over. But there was something in that moment that was inside me that was just like, fuck that. I'm going to get back in the jet and prove these people wrong. And I had every reason at this point to like bite off on all this darkness and overwhelming. I just crashed an $89 million jet into the ocean. My body's destroyed. I'm paralyzed. Like my life is over. This career I've been working at my entire adult life is gone. And I had every reason to bite off on their prognosis of the medical professionals too. You know, hey, they're doctors and professionals, like they know. But instead, I decided to kind of tender this little kernel of hope, which was there, which was like, fuck these guys. I'm going to come back and I'm going to walk back into this hospital someday with my wings back on my chest and my flight suit and be like, look, I'm back flying again. Can you believe it? And so that became my little kernel of hope that I started to fuel and put kindling on it. And it started to build into a bigger and bigger fire. And every day was just like, how do I get something moving? And as little as it was, maybe that just meant I could scoop my butt a little bit on the bed. Maybe it meant I wiggled something. But little by little, keeping at it consistently day in and just focusing on what I could do and doing it to the best of my ability. Over the course of 3 months, I was able to regain the ability of my body enough to walk around on a walker like a little old lady. I then spent the next 2 years undergoing pretty intensive rehabilitation, more surgeries, overcoming prescription drug addiction to the wild variety of pain meds they had me on, from oxycodone and OxyContin, massive doses of gabapentin, amitriptyline, tramadol, trazodone, all the stuff to counter effect those side effects. There was just this chemical cocktail that I had to figure out how to get myself off of, because the doctors were trained to just keep me on more and more of this stuff. But eventually I got off that. I went through a field naval evaluation board for the mishap of crashing a jet, which ruled in my favor. And I gained a stack of medical waivers. That was another miracle. And after 2 years, I was able to max out the Navy's physical fitness test again. And I returned to flying Super Hornets. But it was this urge and drive that I wanted to get back on this fire-breathing dragon that had bucked me off. And I wanted to get back on the horse.
Well, I know most people understand it. I've broken at least. I was a freestyle skier, soccer player, blown both knees, broken both wrists. You know, wiped out several times in the fire. You know, in the fire department. Rehab is not easy. And you know, in a lot of stuff, most doctors go is just take. You know, again, take the pain meds. Do it. If it hurts, take this. Here, if it hurts, take that. It must have been grueling just trying to, like you said, just the little movements must have been grueling. And I know you had the slimmer of hope that you're going to get back to it. But how grueling was the rehabilitation itself? It mustn't have been comfortable. There must have been certain times that you slip back and saying it's not going to happen.
Yeah. You not every day was a sunny one, you know, and there was some dark times in there where it was overwhelming, you know, especially thinking like, I'm going to be responsible for this jet. I'm going to lose my wings. I'm never going to learn to walk again. And it was painful. You know, the nerve pain that I was experiencing was extreme, which is why I was on so many pain meds. So, you know, there were some really dark, challenging days, but I was able to kind of keep that end goal in sight and keep working towards it. And not every day was a win, you know, but by staying consistent with it and trying to keep that hope alive, it went a long ways. I think there's more to the mind and mindset than I think most people give it credit for. And if you bite off on the negativity and the darkness and the statistics and all of that bullshit, you know, I probably wouldn't have tried to be a fighter pilot in the first place, because I would have looked at it and gone, the probability of doing that is so slim. Nobody does that, especially me. But instead, if you can go, well, maybe I could, and I'm going to work at it. I'm going to bust my ass every day. And it's amazing what you can do when you stay consistent with it.
So you have this incredible mindset. You're going through the grueling pain. You're trying to battle the addiction. When did you realize that normal medicine, what they were giving you or what they were telling you, just wasn't working, and you needed to find something else because you wanted that, you had that drive so much to get there that you needed something more than what they were actually giving you?
Yeah, I mean, I found out pretty quickly that the pain meds weren't doing a whole lot of good for me. Fortunately, I was exposed to something called prolotherapy, which this hippie doctor with long hair showed up at my VA hospital room one day while I'm still an inpatient in the polytrauma center, still learning how to walk. And he had this little leather bag, and he said, I got something. You need to sign this document to try it. Now, I hadn't had to sign anything for all the meds and all the other crap they were pumping me full of. But for this guy, I had to sign a special thing, a special waiver. But all he did is he took out a little syringe and a bag of glucose, so sugar water. And he filled up the syringe, and then he popped a few of these little subcutaneous pockets up and down my foot and my leg where I was experiencing this overwhelming nerve pain that was like 10 out of 10, screaming at the top of your lungs pain that would just hit intermittently all throughout the day and night. And after he did this, about 5 minutes with maybe $50 of medical supplies, if that, that pain subsided like 90+% and never came back. So that kind of took the doorway and opened it for the pain management and allowed me to get back to the cockpit and get off all the pain drugs. But then, later in my career, I started to struggle with the mental side of things. I likely had an unresolved brain injury from the ejection itself, which I noticed little things as I returned to the cockpit and returned to active duty in a fleet squadron, was busy again. But I kind of just shrugged it off and said, I'll get through this. But I had a flight down at Tyndall Air Force Base. We were doing a live fire weapon exercise. And I came back from that flight. And while I had vivid memory of certain parts of the flight, there was portions I couldn't remember. And as I'm in the debrief, I'm getting confused by things very easily, and I just didn't quite feel right. I tried to sleep it off. All night I could not sleep. My heart was racing. I was having panic attacks, which I had never experienced like this before. And I just tried to tough it out the next day. But by the end of that next day, I was like, my mind was just racing. I was just scared for no reason. I got back to my hotel room and I sat on the bed, and it felt like the entire room just tumbled around me from vertigo. Couldn't sleep. Now, there'd been a number of issues in the F-18 community where the pressurization systems were malfunctioning and causing rapid decompression. And similar to like divers coming up from depth too quickly, the nitrogen can come out of solution in your blood and it can form little bubbles. If you get those in your joints, it's type 1 DCS. It's very painful, and they call it the bends. But if you get those little bubbles in your brain, it can block off blood flow and cause basically like an aneurysm or a stroke-like symptoms where your brain can shut down. It can kill you. It can cause major mental debilitation. It had gotten to the point in the F-18 community, they had started to put hyperbaric treatment facilities on the aircraft carriers. So when guys came back from missions, they could go right into the chamber if they needed to. And so they rushed me to a dive chamber. I spent the night inside that getting squeezed to try to get those bubbles out of my brain and get the blood flow restored. But it threw something off in me. And I think I likely had that unresolved brain injury, and it was just adding insult to injury. When I got back from that detachment, I reluctantly went into the dock on base to see the flight surgeon. And the only reason I did, I knew it was likely going to compromise my medical clearance, potentially my security clearance. Anytime in that kind of high-speed job, and I'd imagine in the fire service as well, if you go in and you have some sort of mental health issue and you talk about it, it can often mean the end of your job. And so while I'd worked so hard not only to get to this cockpit in the first place and then to get back into it after all of this, and now I have to go in and confess that something's not right, because I was just in a spot where I knew it was going to be dangerous if I continued. And when I did finally confess, I pretty quickly got a delayed onset PTSD diagnosis, and it was back to more pills and more pills. And I didn't want that, but that was painted as the only option. And as I got more and more of these pills, in this case, like SSRIs, antipsychotic medications, sleep medications, things to help me shut down my nervous system that was just in overdrive. and talk about my emotions and feelings. And it was all kind of painted as, oh, this is just something emotionally that I need to get over, which was bullshit.
Right.
Looking retrospectively, my brain physiology was physically damaged from at least 2 brain injury exposures now, the ejection and now this DCS event. And instead of trying to fix the hardware and really look at what needed to be fixed, it was just masking the symptoms with these pills, which is all too common in conventional medicine. And it's crushing people. And it ended up just destroying my life. I mean, I went from the panic attacks and paranoia, but that evolved into like full on psychoses. I thought I was being hunted by the government. My wife had just had our newborn little boy, and I came home and I would like grab the food off of the stove and throw it in the garbage. And I would say, we can't eat that, it's poison. Well, I was being poisoned, but it was in these FDA approved pills. But I kind of went out of my mind. I thought I was being hunted. I was hiding from the windows, and I was very erratic. Eventually, I was medically retired and continued that same treatment at the VA once I'd gotten out. And it was just more pills. And the reason it's not working is because you need more pills. And it was this insane cycle of just doing the same thing and getting the same results and then doing more of it. And it was crushing me to the point I ended up living in an inpatient psych facility run by the VA, seeing abysmal treatment of American veterans in that facility because all it was just more pills. You're not getting good sleep. You're literally woken up every 15 minutes with a flashlight in your face to make sure you're not harming yourself when you're on one-to-one care like I was coming out of a psychosis. So you're not getting sleep. You're not getting nutrition because the food is ultra-processed junk. You're not drinking clean water. You're not getting exercise. You're not getting sunlight. We were lucky if we got to go outside once a week into a concrete yard surrounded by high-rise brick buildings with metal fencing. It was just the worst environment possible for trying to heal a human being. And instead, it's just to get you on all these pills. And eventually, I was able to get out of that facility, but I was just a broken human. I felt that I had slipped through the thin cracks of the veneer of our society into the underbelly of it all. And I saw what it really was. And it was a dark place to be. And I was broken and I was just loaded up on all these drugs and my life was falling apart. I was on the verge of divorce. I was pushing my children away from me. I was pushing everybody away. I just wanted to be like an old dog and wander off into the woods and die. But I was very fortunate. What really turned the tide for me was I came across the book, How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan. I had already read some of his books on nutrition and how our food system's all jacked up, like In Defense of Food. But then I read that and I realized that there might be another option for treating trauma and mental health conditions using psychedelics. And so I sought that out. And I was able to get connected with a veteran nonprofit organizations that provided these kinds of services. And I got plugged into this network of nonprofits that were able to fund me to get that treatment. And it completely changed my life. I went from driving off the edge of this cliff, losing everything that I had, my family, my kids, my own life. And over the course of a few years of psychedelic-assisted therapy, traumatic brain injury clinics, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, nutraceutical supplementation, customized blood work done to really see what was going on with the physiology of my brain. And once they started to actually heal the brain, which you can heal, it's made of cells just like everything else in our body. And when you give it a chance to just heal and give it the right conditions, it's really amazing how much we can restore. Even from a place of deep psychoses, terrible mental health issues, all sorts of trauma. I feel blessed because I'm here to talk about this and I get a second chance at life, maybe a third chance, at this point.
Well, we're definitely happy you're talking about it. You're okay. Did you have any preconceived notions? I know you read the book. Do you have any preconceived notions about psychedelics? Because I know that's a big thing right now. A lot of people have preconceived notions of that, especially for addicts or something. Like they're already on a bunch of medication, but you're giving them another drug. Isn't it the same thing? Or did you go in with an open mind or read a little bit more into it?
Yeah, I had a pretty open mind. When I was about 16, actually, I sitting around a campfire with a bunch of buddies, had a handful of these crunchy little mushrooms. And at that time, I was experiencing kind of like a depression. I was angry at the world. I was pissed off. And I just wanted to burn everything down. I was sick of being stuck in a classroom filling out worksheets, and I was like, this is bullshit. But after that experience, I came out of it and I had been connected to something larger than myself. And that experience stuck with me. And I remember that after reading this book, I was like, oh yeah, I remember, because that depression lifted. It never came back. There's really got to be something to this. And so I went into it with a very open mind. I didn't see it as like a drug. You know, I think it's unfortunately categorized and stigmatized in the way that people stigmatize like crack cocaine or something that maybe is going to tear your life apart and destroy you, that doesn't have a medical benefit. But these entheogens, these indigenous medicines, they are the original medicine that have been part of human civilization since ancient, prehistory. And we're actually in a bizarre time right now that these medicines are not part of our culture. And, I don't think that means we need to just legalize everything and throw it into the American public, because people are so broken and messed up right now that they would likely do more harm to themselves. But there needs to be channels open so that people can access this stuff in a ceremonial setting, in a medical setting, treated with reverence, with preparation and integration then on the backside. And when done properly, with the right dosage, with people that know what they're doing, and done with respect to these medicines, it's profound, the healing impact that they can have. For one, just resetting the default node network of the human mind to kind of give you this new opportunity. To use Michael Pollan's analogy, it's like getting a fresh snowfall over all these ruts of negative emotions and behaviors that have become your life, that have become you. And with that fresh snowfall, now you're standing at the top of the mountain on this blue sky day, and you get to carve down on your skis a whole new path. It resets the dopamine system. So if you're dealing with any sort of addiction issues, whatever that may be, drugs, alcohol, sex, gambling, whatever it is, it resets that system so you don't have this need and this anxiety around that. And it creates neuroregeneration in a way that is profound. The body heals the nervous system and the brain in a way that is truly miraculous. And there's more and more research coming out on this stuff every day. And there's a lot of momentum building behind it to try to push this stuff through. There's also a lot of pushback from the pharmaceutical industry. This is a threat to their business model. If people can actually heal, they're not going to need to be on these SSRIs and antipsychotic medications and benzodiazepines for the rest of their life, getting more and more miserable and more sick, requiring more and more medications, more of their products. So, hey, it's an exciting time for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I hear it in your voice. Like you're, and I know you're really advocating to get access to this, especially for veterans. I'm advocating it for first responders and everything. What do you feel like is the biggest challenge? Because I know Virginia they were trying to pass a bill and it got turned down. Is it legislation? Is it still the stigma about it? What do you feel why is it so hard to get this through? Because there's so many veterans coming out that have done it, from psilocybin to ibogaine to MDMA, ayahuasca. Everybody's coming out saying, listen, it's changed their lives. Studies are coming out. Why can't we just get somebody to listen? Like, let's do something different. Is it because of the pharmaceuticals, or is it something else? What's your opinion?
Yeah. I think it's a combination of factors. One, we have a very broken political system that is largely controlled by industry, and the pharmaceutical and medical industry is the largest industry and most powerful, most clout of any industry that's ever existed in human history. And now we're trying to push through something that goes against the people that likely have the most control over our government of anybody, and the control of the policies, control of the VA. So that's a huge challenge. I was just in DC this summer advocating for MDMA-assisted therapy. And despite all the research being designed in partnership with the FDA on how do we structure this study, and all the promising results showing all of these people having tremendous impact in ways that there's no existent approved treatment that comes anywhere close to what this provided the veterans in subsiding the effects of PTSD and improving these people's quality of life with durability. And despite all of that, it was voted against by the FDA to keep it scheduled as a Schedule 1 drug. So, no highly addictive and no medical application, which everybody knows is nonsense. You're doing this stuff in a clinical setting or a ceremonial setting. It's not like you're taking the MDMA home with you to go party with even. It's complete absurdity. But fortunately, it kind of showed their hand, and we kind of know now where they stand. I think there's a tremendous amount of support and outpouring, and I think the veteran and first responder community, I think, is going to get to lead this charge, because I think we can help break that stigma that's surrounding it for some of the American public still, and to really help to put pressure onto our lawmakers to change the way things are, even if we have to fight the pharmaceutical industry tooth and nail the whole way. There's a lot of forces pushing this thing forward.
I know we're trying to push it really hard. Even just cannabis right now, they screwed that all up completely. The government and the way they ruined California, and the way they regulated and everything else. I believe that if we can get this medicine out, we can not only treat, but there's a probability that we can actually prevent PTSD or
Oh yeah,
brain damage from happening. So you imagine a firefighter over 30 years that can go to one of these ceremonies maybe once a year and keep his brain active and with nutrition and, like you said, proper blood work, and follows it through, or even microdosing when it becomes legal. I think there's an opportunity that it doesn't build up to where we have to wait till firefighter commits suicide,
right.
or drinks himself to death, or a veteran comes back and doesn't know what's going on. I think we can have an active military first responder community that's healthy, and that they can serve their country, serve the community, and then at the end of their career, they can enjoy it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there's definitely a role for the proactive use of a lot of these modalities I've now been experienced to. Be that, I know Doc Kirk Parsley, he's a former SEAL and a physician who came back into the SEAL community on the doctor side of the house. And he was a big advocate and one of the first pioneers in the Navy that I know of that started to see use this idea of being proactive with these guys' healths. And so he was doing lab work. He was giving these guys customized nutraceuticals and peptides and hormonal therapy. And he was optimizing these guys' health while they were in the teams. And you're spending all this money to train people like that. Or in the pilot community, you're spending millions of dollars to train a pilot. Why wouldn't we take care of them? Why wouldn't we optimize their health while they're in? So one, they remain more durable. They're higher performing while they're in. And then their longevity is much better, which means you're retaining that skill. You're retaining that experience in the military. I mean, it's such a win-win for everybody involved. And now on the backside, you're saving all this money because you're not having to pay for all the disability and all the medical bullshit that comes if you don't take care of yourself. So I think there's an exciting opportunity to use this proactively in the first responder community, the military communities, and elsewhere. Let's optimize people's health so they can perform and be at their best and be there a lot longer. And it would make just a healthier, happier society too.
100%. Now, you also just wrote a book as well, didn't you? Phoenix Revive?
Yeah, Phoenix Revival, the aftermath of naval aviation's fastest survived ejection. It just released about a month ago, but it's now available on Amazon. You can get it hardcover, paperback, ebook, and it's also on Audible. So whatever your flavor, please pick up a copy. There's a lot more to the story I think people will enjoy.
We're gonna have some links in it for some people can actually order the book. So when's the movie coming out? Is it gonna be like part of the third Top Gun, or?
Hey, there's talk of it. We'll see where it goes. There is definitely some interest, but that whole process is a huge undertaking. So we'll see where it goes. It's out of my hands at this point. But.
All right, Kegan, thank you very much for jumping on the show. I appreciate it, man. It was a great story. I like what you're doing. I like the way the whole story. I'm glad you're okay, and I'm glad you're fighting the same fight that I'm fighting to get this to all of us.
Yeah, likewise, Gary. Thanks for sharing this kind of message. I think we're in a lucky time in human history where we can share this kind of idea freely in a long conversation, vice a couple snippets of whatever the mainstream news wants you to, devour. So yeah, exactly. Thank you for what you're doing as well.
Thank you, sir. You have yourself a wonderful weekend. We'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks, Gary.
If you're still listening to this, that means you gained some type of value. So what we need you to do is leave a review and make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode of The Good Dudes Grow.